Hi, how are you doing? I'm just going to talk a little bit more about triggers. I talked about that earlier today. And so I want to get back into that. So I talked about how to surpass the triggers, how to work through them, and how to hopefully, if you can work through them, they won't be reoccurring, or at least they'll happen less often, or they'll never happen again if you work through it. That's been my experience. So the other thing I want to talk about is when a toxic person uses a trigger, like they'll set you up for a trigger. I was talking about natural occurring triggers before, about like seeing somebody that you don't expect to see who brings on a trigger and they come towards you slowly, so you slowly begin to trigger. You can actually feel yourself starting to tense up and then go into a trigger, opposed to when, let's just say you were in a car accident or maybe a swimming accident or something. And so when you see a car accident, you might get anxiety because you remember your car accident, where that comes on suddenly and you're in a almost a panic, more like an anxiety, like some anxious. So what I'm talking about now is that when you're set up for a trigger, like a toxic person will literally set you up for a trigger. They'll know you're coming, they'll plan for your arrival, and they'll have things to say. Now, they actually activated this trigger in you a long time ago so they could use it down the road. So when a toxic person wants something immediately, they'll cause some kind of a disgruntled argument, criticize you, anything to get you to feel upset. They want to wound you. And so if it was a good enough attempt of wounding you, they know they can use it later on. So it's like they store this trigger up for later. So when they think they're due or they need something from you or they want to punish you for something you didn't do or something you did do that they didn't agree with, and these are normal things like you went to go see this family member that they don't really like because maybe that family member's on to them, so they don't want you to spend time with them. So when you come home from visiting somebody like that, they feel triggered actually. And so they want to trigger you. So that's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about when you end up getting triggered through a trigger. And so basically what ends up happening is they set you up, they know you're coming home, and they bring up that old wound, that old trigger, that thing that upset you a long time ago. So they use that to reopen it and cause you to trigger so they can quickly get you into a defense mode instead of having to work you into a new defense mode and letting on to the fact that they don't like that you went to go visit somebody. Because if you actually told them that you knew that they were mad at you because you visited somebody that they didn't want you to visit, and you told that person that you had an argument and that that person doesn't want you to visit them because they know that they can be toxic, then that's going to cause a problem for them. So instead of bringing that up and looking like they have an issue, they rather bring up an old trigger and use that old trigger against you today. So basically, that's what they do. So when this is the behavior that they use. And so these are the things that you need to watch out for. So you can actually prepare yourself if you're going to get around somebody who's triggered you in the past in that way. It might take you a little time to realize that's what they're doing, but eventually you might say, wait a minute, every time I see this person, they're bringing up some old thing that I thought was water under the bridge that I forgave them for because they actually want you to forgive them for these things. But that doesn't matter. Even though you forgive them for them, they actually use that as a trigger as well because let's just say you forgive them for something. But for some reason they bring it up. Let's just say you forgive them for flirting with somebody else and you're in a relationship. And so you get over it, you forget about it, you don't want to think about it. Well, you see that person and instead of you bringing it up, because you really did forgive them, they'll be like, "Oh, I know you don't like that person." You'll be like, "I don't have a problem with that person. I have a problem with the fact that you flirted with that person. I don't have a problem with that person." And so now they created that trigger out of something that you forgave them for because now they're accusing you of not liking somebody when it was actually them. So what I'm saying is you can figure out this if you watch the patterns, because these people, this is what they do, and they do it over and over again. That's what a pattern is. That's what toxic behavior is. It's a pattern. Always find a pattern in these toxic behaviors, even if they start a new one and it works, because they're really lazy and they're not really as clever as they'd like to think that they are. Their main thing is to find a place to poke you, to find the thing that aggravates you. And once they find that thing that aggravates you, they'll just keep using it over and over again. And they have a few different methods on using the same thing over and over again, but it's basically the same thing. And they are calculated. They'll bring other people in, and if they bring other people in, they'll always bring other people in. Like, they'll use their same modes, but they'll use them in a little bit of a different way so that you'll once you get to know this person and how they work, you usually can figure it out. And you can find other places, and you'll actually think back in your past and be like, "Oh, okay, now that makes sense. Why did that happen? Why did they get upset with me because I carried on a conversation with somebody over here?" And we were having a really good conversation, and then we went home that night and there was a fight over it because they're mad at you because you had a conversation that's with somebody that they wish they could hold a conversation with, but they can't because they're too busy manipulating the whole room, manipulating the situation. And you found somebody that you had a common interest with, where in actuality, they almost don't know how to do that. If they find out that person has an interest, they'll pretend that they have an interest, but they don't have a common interest with somebody who carries on a healthy conversation. So that makes them jealous because they know they're lacking in that area. Because when you're manipulative, you really are incapable of having healthy conversation. So you